3, 2, 1, we're live.
All righty, welcome everyone. Amy, would you like to do a roll call, then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Here.
Faulkner?
Here.
Director?
Here. Here.
Director Petrov? Here. Vice President? Cuneo?
Here. We have a quorum. Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. All right. Do we have public comments?
Yes.
Public comments first.
Read the.
Yeah. Okay. On public comments, welcome to the Special School District of St. Louis County's Board of Education business meeting. Up to 30 minutes of each Board of Education business meeting will be set aside to hear public comments. The Board of Education values your input and thanks you for your comment. Now, these are the guidelines. Each comment is limited to 3 minutes to address any item that is a legitimate part of the business of the Board. No confidential or personnel-related topics are reviewed. Comments will be read in the order that they're received by email. The contents of the email, the sender's name and address have been submitted to the Secretary of the Board and will become part of the official public record of the meeting. Amy.
Yes, we
all
have
yours.
2 public comments this evening. The first one was received by Amy Parker. Thank you for your service and your commitment to maintain a safe environment for our children in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. The decisions you are making are life-altering, and I appreciate the complexity of the task at hand. I am writing today to plead for your continued real commitment to advocating for the safe return of students to our technical schools. My son is a senior at South Tech's Precision Machining Program. His goals include a career in machining and service to our country in the Missouri National Guard. South Tech, SSD, and his instructor have provided Sam the opportunity to find what he is looking for in both his current schooling and future career. From the moment he stepped into Mr. A's classroom during open house, his goals clicked into place. Attending tech involves making tough decisions for a high schooler, often requiring a learning lab to make the schedule work. It can mean foregoing a physics class, marching band, or foreign language. In a similar way, it can also require a compromise between the partner schools and tech, including compromises that we're committed to as they move through the return to in-person classes. It's not perfect, but it works to help students like mine meet their goals. Tech students are training to be frontline essential workers who keep our nation operating, even amidst difficult circumstances like these. Not only are they capable of following the safety procedures, but they also deserve the chance to learn as students enrolled in a more traditional track. Our community needs them to be ready to enter the workforce, like counting others before having them done. I shared my concerns with Principal Loshi and Board Member Brown. A response came from Mr. Anders, Executive Director of Career Technical Education and College and Career Readiness. His response mirrored response stated at board meeting and on social media about midday transportation changes to belt changes in class structure at partner schools. According to the board, the most workable solution is returning on January 19th. Is the unspoken goal for tech students to give up their goals, drop a semester, and return to their home schools? Or will students be forced to grapple with the knowledge that their education has been compromised by a school board not willing to meet their needs in the same way they work to meet the needs of their peers? I propose a different, most workable solution to get tech students back in the classroom. Stretch, just like the rest of the world has done in these past months. Think outside the box. Ask about transportation needs. Ask about challenges to get the required credits. Ask us how we can help. Our kids want to be in class. Our kids need to be in class. Let us help. It is frustrating that decisions have made on hypotheticals with minimal input from students and parents. Tech students need to be in the tech classroom. Let's get them there. Public comment number 2 is from Laura Newworth Dutch. I'm saying that right. Dear members of the SSD Board of Education, I am trying to wrap my head around the timing of us returning to school. The COVID-19 cases in the U.S. are at an all-time high. Countries that had brought numbers down and as a result relaxed their constraints are now in the process of shutting down once again. States in the U.S. that had brought numbers down and relaxed constraints once again have numbers rising. I am not clear on why we think St. Louis will not have the same trend. We had experts from Washington University come and speak to us about how it is relatively safe to be in school. They are speaking from data that has come from schools that require masks and distancing. These are not parameters that will happen in our schools. We have students who, for various reasons, will not wear a mask. Staff have been told that these students may return to the building. Masks are not required but encouraged at SSD schools. The students at our SSD schools will need greater than what is available at their home schools. We have students who need physical care and support multiple times daily. Very few of our students will not need people within 6 feet of them multiple times a day. Put staff and students in unsafe positions as we will be close to students who are not masked and then be getting those germs to other staff and students. Staff move from room to room. I myself will be in 5 different classrooms throughout a given day. Our students also see SLPs, OTs, PTs, nursing staff, and school social workers. This means that even if everyone in my classroom is masked, my students and I will have potential exposure to those who do not mask. Staff share break rooms, the mail room, copy, workroom, bathrooms, etc. There's no place in the school where mixing of staff does not happen. This increases the exposure to both staff and students. Many families, including mine, have formed quarantine circles so that our social and emotional needs can be met. Once we go back to school, these circles are broken. This means that socializing outside of the workday will be cut off. The weather is no longer going to give opportunities for outdoor distance learning, distant social events. Many staff and families of students also have loved ones that they care for that have health risks. This takes all us away from being able to perform that care. We keep being told that the repercussions of the virus on students is not that great. Teens tend to recover well. Teens are also more likely to be asymptomatic and not run a fever. Because of this, it is very possible for them to feel and appear well enough to come to school and still be able to carry and pass on the virus. While I am glad that students tend to do well, I find it upsetting that the well-being of staff is not being taken into consideration. We are not teens. Adults do not tend to heal as well. Parents have a choice whether to potentially expose their children by sending them to school. Although I have this choice as a parent and have decided that both of my kids will remain virtual, I am not given this choice for myself and my own well-being. Finally, each time I have written to the board, I have stressed the consistency needed for our students' programs. This hybrid model requires students and staff to navigate 3 styles of learning: in-person, live, virtual, and thank you. It also requires them to negotiate learning for both school and home, which is very difficult for many of our kids. When staff or students need to quarantine, this will require additional adjustments. Virtual learning is not ideal. However, it allows for the consistency that students need. I sincerely hope that you reconsider the return dates and plans for students.
Thank you, Amy. All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Superintendent's reports, please.
All right, we have several reports tonight for you. Any? What was the first report?
Legislative update.
Yes, legislative update. Bill Gamble will be giving us a 15-minute report on the legislative update, and how things are coming up for our SSD schools. Hi, Bill, do you want to update us?
Whoops. I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you very much. I also have Katie Gamble on, so she can, if I miss anything, she can chime in and add any other information or perspective. This last legislative session was abbreviated, shortened because of the coronavirus. The General Assembly adjourned in March, adjourned in March the 11th and came back April the 27th for a 3-week session. So it was very abbreviated, shortened. They got a few things done. Most importantly was passing the fiscal year 2021 budget, as well as spending authority for the CARES Act, the third round of stimulus funding. Last week, the governor called a special session that will begin after the election in November. We're thinking that they will formally go in on the 5th. The House will really start their deliberations on the governor's call on the 9th. The governor, and we haven't gotten the specifics yet, but just general topics: school nutrition services program funding, emergency solutions grant program for homeless prevention, job training grants, and child support payments. This will be, the governor believes that the previous appropriations bill didn't specifically allow him to appropriate or distribute the CARES Act funding from the last stimulus bill. So this will give him the opportunity to address those various issues. Again, we don't know the dollar amounts. We don't know the specifics. This is just a general summary. Our biggest challenge this last session was House Bill 2569 by Representative Dogan. It established new procedures for annexation into the special school district. The language was drafted and added as an amendment to House Bill 1540. This would have allowed the St. Louis City School District, public school district, to be annexed into the special school district. Now, I want to emphasize that this bill was never assigned to committee, and it was only assigned to committee on the last day of the session, which is normally those bills that don't get assigned during the session, they assign them all the last day. And it never had a hearing. So we were never afforded the opportunity to address the specifics of the bill. Near the, right before they adjourned on March the 11th, this language was added to 1540 on the House floor. It wasn't really thoroughly explained. All the implications weren't addressed before we were in the building, we got over on the House side and started pulling people out. It had already gone on as an amendment. Generally, the discussion was the St. Louis City Public School District needs help, and the special school district can address those issues, and they can absorb those services, and we can annex those special education services into the special school district. We provided opposition testimony in the Senate. We sent letters to the St. Louis County delegation and the Education Committee and the chairs. The sponsor, as soon as we explained to him, right after the amendment went on, agreed right then and there that he would ask for this language to be removed over in the Senate. The cost of the bill could have cost us $50 million. And if you added the charter schools, it could be an additional $74 million. And St. Louis County voters weren't allowed to vote. It was just a vote by the St. Louis City. So it was quite, it was an interesting piece of legislation, many flaws. And when they voted the Senate committee substitute bill out of committee, this was removed unanimously by the committee at the sponsor's urging. Now, I will tell you that the bill did not make it to the Senate floor for debate, 1540, but as it was reported in, it did not have this language in it.
And I think it's important to highlight one of the biggest concerns really was that there was no money to help support the additional services. And so that was one of the biggest concerns, is just the lack of, there was no funding to go with it, in addition to some other pieces of the bill that were concerning. So
when the General Assembly comes back in, we will, for the special session, we'll be over there. We'll start interacting with members and touching base with them, reminding them of this issue and the problems with this piece of legislation. And hopefully we're not going to have to deal with it again. But I think that the most positive thing about it was that the special school district is highly respected, and it felt as though that you were an entity that could solve a major problem with the city, the St. Louis City Public Schools in special education services, but very problematic as far as the bill is concerned. What we see going forward, there was legislation and language that was included in this bill that dealt with restraints in seclusion rooms. This, as we saw the piece of legislation, as you analyzed it, it's very much the policy of special school districts. Also, the recording of, allowing for the recording of IEP hearings, again, something that conformed to the procedures of the special school district. We see those two issues coming back. Of course, you start all over again, and we'll want to analyze that that language again and take a look at it and make sure that we still are okay with it, and if not, what types of issues that we need to have addressed or the language needs to be addressed. There's also, we anticipate that there'll be legislation again pushed and moved that will would move school board elections to November. Again, problematic. This will be something that all school districts are going to be opposed to, but we anticipate this coming back. The budget will probably be the biggest issue this coming session in January. We feel that we don't know where we are, to be quite honest with you, because of the coronavirus, how it's going to affect. What is also going to be problematic is that when the General Assembly passed a tax cut bill, it allowed that if there was a certain amount of growth in revenues during the fiscal year, then it would roll back our taxes by 0.1%. Well, because of the coronavirus and because people were allowed to pay their taxes later, we're going to have 2 collection years in the same year, 2 collection periods in the same year. This could cause that to be triggered and would have to be addressed by legislation to not have that trigger. And that's going to be a pretty difficult hill to climb, especially in this General Assembly. We think that school choice is going to be a major topic, both charter expansion and vouchers. We will get a better picture after the November elections of the committee makeups, but we're pretty sure that the education chairs, Representative Basie and Senator O'Laughlin, will continue to be chairs of the respective committees in the House and the Senate. There is going to be a lot of change in the makeup of the committees because we have a lot of turnover because of term limits. And those committees will probably get, the speaker will assign those committee members after the first of the year, probably around the second or third week in January. We do know that the one thing we do know is that Representative Rob Vescovo from Jefferson County, he has been elected speaker, and he will be the Speaker of the House. All other elections will take place the Thursday after this next Tuesday, when they caucus, and then they'll formally be elected in January. The Republicans, because of the districts and the lack of competitive races, because there just haven't been, Democrats haven't filed in every district, the Republicans will hold their majorities in both the House and the Senate. So the Republicans will still be in control as we go forward for the next 2 years. You have some competitive races going on in St. Louis County that we're all watching. You will have 3 new senators from St. Louis County, and you've got 1/4 district out there that's going to be very competitive. So there are changes in representation in the St. Louis County area going forward during the next 2 years. That's our report. Katie, do I have anything else that I have failed to add, or you need to?
I don't think so. I think if you asked us right now, current Governor Parson has an edge on State Auditor Nicole Galloway, but I'm hesitant to pick any races because you could just never know what anything's going to look like as far as turnout. But so when we talk about the Republicans holding majorities, that's the House and the Senate. I think probably, lean that the Republicans will hold their seats in the statewide, but at this point, it's anything could happen.
We're not making any predictions, are we?
I'm not going to make any predictions.
Yeah.
Bill, I have a question.
Sure.
Just as a matter of note, when you were mentioning about the merger with the city, was there any language that was mentioned in the bill regarding the expansion of board? Because I would assume that their consideration of that would also for them to want representation and for the number of schools that are in the city.
Well,
first thing came to mind, that I also would have thought about an expansion of our board.
No, there wasn't. And I will tell you that one of the major flaws in this proposal was it was patterned after moving one county into another community college district. Well, it's not the same. And from time to time, you'll have counties who will want to move into a different district, and it's pretty non-controversial. But that's how this statute was patterned. So it doesn't take into consideration these funding issues, the representation issue. That's why the St. Louis City Public Schools was opposed to it. It didn't give them any representation. St. Louis County voters don't have a say. It was, the bill had many flaws in it.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next superintendent report is reopening updates, and that is going to be prepared and presented by Dr. Grigsby and Kevin Ander and Ms. Casey Winston.
Good evening. We're lining up. Just lining up. Good evening, President Cudio, Board of Directors, and Dr. Keenan. I'm Kelly Grigsby, Executive Director of Schools and Programs. We're here tonight to give you some reopening updates. Next slide. The contents of our communication today will cover the communication plan with regards to reopening, feedback we've received from any sources, and updates for special ed schools, the core programs, VSP, which is Vocational Skills Program, and technical schools, and our next steps. Next slide. So with regards to communications, after the board meeting on the 13th, I believe, staff received a notification to return to work tomorrow, October 28th. All staff will receive that notification. Families will receive initial notification from Dr. Keenan, outlining the phased reentry and the hybrid for all of our different schools and programs. Family choice information and also a message from building principals was sent to families the next day on the 14th. We've been doing individual follow-up with families, and communications prepared, frequently asked questions documents, and we've been working on reopening videos. Partner districts, career and technical education liaisons have also received communication. Next slide. We're each going to update you on our family choice responses for our respective areas. With regards to family choice for the SSD schools and programs, you should have a handout, looks like this. On the handout, you'll have specific information for each of our respective areas. I'm going to cover the SSD schools. You have the information there by school. As a total number of schools, we have 775 students we're serving. That does not include Lakeside or JDC. It includes those are court-appointed programs, so they're going to be a little bit different. Out of the 775 students, we serve 481, which is a roughly 64%, have elected to return in person in our hybrid model. 266 have elected to remain 100% virtual. That's roughly 36%. And we're still waiting on responses from 28 families. So we have a pretty good response rate. I suspect we'll be pretty close to having no responses soon. It is fluid. It does change periodically, but that's where we are at this time. The general feedback from students, from staff and families, from teachers and staff, is that they're still concerned about returning. They still have concerns about their safety and reopening and what it's going to look like and the logistics of all of that, but they'll be back and ready to go tomorrow. With regards to what we've been doing, we've been working on updating reentry plans. We've been working on making sure that all of our schools have PPE and all of the supplies that they need in order to reopen. We have consulted several different checklists from across the country to make sure we've hit all of the areas that we need to hit. We've constructed to-do lists. We've been working on those at the district level and both at the building level. And we developed our student contact tracing process. So we are in good shape and ready to go. I'm sure there will be situations that we can't anticipate, but we're ready to tackle those. Next slide. With regards to the court programs, our Lakeside School staff return tomorrow as well, and students will return in a hybrid model starting on November 9th with our SSD schools programs. Juvenile detention is not our facility, so we are not able to return there until the courthouse approves our reentry. And currently, they are at a phase 1, and that's based on COVID cases. They have to be at a phase 2 in order to allow us back into the building to resume schooling in person. We'll keep you updated on that. Next slide. All right.
President Cuneo, Vice President Brown, Board Directors, Dr. Keaton. I'm Casey Wisdom, Director of Transition Services and the Vocational Skills Program. So feedback from families, you'll see on our initial survey responses, we have 207 students enrolled, 119 returning in person, 73 virtual, and 15 no response. That hasn't changed even since this morning. We're down to 6 no responses, but our percentages are staying about the same, so about 62% returning in person, 38% virtual. As Kelly indicated, our staff, kind of the same feedback, nervous, some anxiety, wanting to come in and do a really great job, but concerned about being able to follow guidelines and procedures, and wanting to make sure that everything is in place for students. Added on to that for us, being in alternate sites, entering into buildings and classrooms that they've not been in before, is another layer of stress for staff. But as Kelly said, they are ready to come back. We have met several times with staff already to review reentry plans, go over guidelines and procedures, and next steps for us, we've created a checklist where we've pulled information out of our reentry plan, and our area coordinators and our program nurse will be meeting with each site individually, reviewing that checklist, making sure that everyone has the PPE that they need, receiving some training on how to use that PPE and when it is necessary, as well as how to identify COVID-19 symptoms and utilize isolation rooms appropriately. So those are some things that we'll be doing with staff next. We too have created a contact tracing process for our program. We also updated our health guidelines and sick policies to reflect the COVID-19 requirements and have sent that to our families as well. Next slide. We are in the process of finalizing where everyone is going, and so we are pretty much there. We have a few things in place that we still need to do in terms of getting classrooms ready for students, furniture, those types of things, but we will be ready by the time students return with all of those pieces. We have developed our cohort groups, and we're working with our teachers to have some voice in how they provide both that in-person and that distance learning instruction, and so that will look a little bit different from site to site depending on what our family choice is in those sites. Some teachers may be doing both for students while we are partnering other teachers to work together to handle some of those larger caseloads in their sites. We plan on having individual schedules to families for those in-person students by Monday, November 2nd, and along with that, any individual site requirements specific to guidelines and procedures that might be in place for their particular sites. Any questions about VSP? Okay, thank you.
All right. So President Cuneo, Vice President Brown, Dr. Keenan, Board of Directors, I'm Kevin Ander, Executive Director of Career and Technical Education in College and Career Readiness, and so I'm going to be updating you on where we're at with the Career and Technical Education schools. As you have on the handout for the Family Choice Survey, we surveyed our families. Our response rate is a little bit lower than what you see in VSP and in the special school district schools. We attribute a lot of that to us not returning right now until January. So we had a number of families who wanted to wait to see what the plan was for their partner district before they wanted to lock in whether or not they were coming virtual or in person. Currently, we have 10 of our 22 partner districts that have not yet announced what their plan is for high school. And so those families who are in one of those 10 districts that have not yet announced what the plan is for high school, they want to wait and see what that is before they commit to what they're going to do for the technical education component of the student's day, is one of the pieces of feedback we've heard from our families. As you heard in public comment tonight, we do have a number of families who have been reaching out where they, especially the ones where the districts have announced a reopen date or students have begun to return, those families are interested in getting their students in person at North Tech or South Tech as soon as that is feasible. So we do have a number of families who are expressing that. The other thing that we're hearing from our families is there's a lot that really do want that virtual option. As you see in our numbers, we have 300 families that have selected virtual as their attendance option for CTE. So that breaks out to right now, 74% are requesting in person, 26% are requesting to attend virtually. So we do have a good number of families who really do want a virtual option for career and technical education. We are also hearing from families who are wanting to come back in person. There's a strong interest in coming back 5 days a week is what they're interested in for career and technical education. We're also getting a lot of questions about logistical challenges, and that really varies from partner district to partner district. For example, we have some districts where for high school they're coming back where students are going to be there on Mondays and Wednesdays or Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have other districts that are bringing students back Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, and so families want to know, if I choose the in-person option for tech, is my tech schedule going to match my sending school high school? And it's really going to vary from high school to high school. We also have a couple partner districts who have changed their bell schedules around for second quarter. Rockwood announced a new bell schedule that they're using for second quarter, and some families wanted to know what does that mean for their student and how does that fit with career and technical education. So we're triaging a lot of very individualized questions when it comes to logistics. Serving 22 districts, it looks a little bit different for every single district. From our teachers and staff, as Kelly said and Casey mentioned, there's definitely some anxiety from our teachers. They've been out of their classrooms for the most part since March, so it's been 7 months since some of them have been in the building. And so there is definitely an anxiousness and anxiety to coming back. We've had a lot of questions about the reentry plans just because we've had to put in some new processes and procedures. Many of those are more rigid than what we had before, limiting who can leave the building, limiting movement around the building because we're trying to keep students and staff safe. And then we've also had a number of questions about why are staff returning now if students are not slated to return until January. So we've had a number of questions in that area. As far as partner district feedback, we've had, for those that are in session, so our partner districts who are returning, we've had a number that came back this week. They're very interested in career and technical education coming back as soon as possible so that they can begin creating a full day schedule for their student, have their schedule at the home high school, and then have their schedule at North or South Tech. We also have had a lot of our partner district liaisons for career and technical education indicate if we're not going to offer a virtual option for students in second semester, they want to know that as soon as possible so that they can begin making alternative arrangements for those students at the home high school. They're not concerned about bringing the students necessarily back to the home high school. They just want to make sure they have lead time so they can get them scheduled and make a schedule that works for that student so they're maximizing their time. We also had a couple districts ask about if we're going to be offering 5 days a week or if it's going to be the phased-in format or how quickly maybe we would get to 5 days a week. Because once we get to 5 days a week, it really solves some transportation pieces on their end. So we've had some questions about that from the partner district. As far as updating our reentry plans and processes, as Kelly mentioned, we've crosswalked our plans with a wide variety of checklists to make sure that we're crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's. And in the student contact tracing process, we believe we have a pretty firm process in place, but we're going to continue to adjust that once we have students back in the building, knowing that it may have to adapt once we fully roll it out. Next slide. So at this point, our instructional plan through January 19th is we're continuing with the distance learning plans. And so our teachers are going to begin tomorrow instructing from the classroom. That means they're going to have full access to all of their instructional materials and resources by being in the classroom. They're also going to be able to receive a greater level of administrative support. They're also going to be able to receive a lot better technical support, that if they have issues while they're live streaming with students, we're going to have people in the building that we can deploy to help solve those issues. So certifications has been a hot topic that we've got a lot of questions from families about. Wanted to keep in mind this first bullet is what we have on our website and recruitment materials, which emphasizes college credit and certification are not guaranteed. Their attainments dependent upon student performance in both the course and on external industry assessments. So just because a student comes to North or South Tech for a specific program, it's not a guarantee that they're going to leave us with a specific certification. In some cases, some of the assessments that we give, like ServSafe was the one that we use for culinary arts that you need to have to go to work in that industry. The industry pass rate on that test is 60% for adults. So we're giving that to high school students. Our pass rate is actually higher than what you're going to see in industry, but still we have a good number of students who complete our program, do everything in the course. It's just a very difficult assessment. So we can't guarantee that a student's going to leave us with a certification. We're working on developing a specific assessment plan for each of our individual programs based off some of them have external factors we cannot control. For example, our health sciences program has a clinical component to it where they have to go out to the long-term care facility to practice certain skills. At this point, our long-term care facilities are not going to let us in the building. We don't know when they're going to let us in the building. So until we can get students out to the clinical site, that will serve as a barrier for students to be able to obtain CNA certification. We're working with our clinical partners, but that's a piece that we don't have full control over. It's up to them whether or not they're going to let us in. Universal Summer Supports is a piece that we really hope will help support some of our programs where we might have some of those logistical challenges by if we can offer the Universal Summer Supports for CTE programs. That might mean by June, we might be able to get into some of the facilities that right now we're not able to access. So we really hope that that can help solve some issues or some of the road bumps we're expecting along the way as we work towards student certification. Next slide. So next steps. So November 9th, students are returning to SSD schools for special education schools programs, including VSP. We're in the process of finalizing the phase dates for the technical high schools. We need to work on establishing the dates for phase 2 and potentially phase 3. And then we need to refine entry. We're going to continue to refine entry plans when students return, because that's really where we're going to see where our gaps are and continue to identify those gaps, identify solutions, and continue to update as we work through this, because it really is going to be an evolving process. Right now, we believe we have everything in place, but we know that there's going to be things that once we have students in the building, we're going to need to address. Next slide. And with that, any questions?
Yes, I'm Untitled High Schools.
Sure.
Is January 19th still the best date to go back?
So the thing that I'm personally really monitoring is the return date for each of our sending schools. So at this point, we've got 10 of our partner districts that have not yet announced a date, or if they've announced a date, that date is in January. For example, Rittner has announced a January return date for their high schools. Riverview has announced a January return date. Hazelwood has announced a January return date. So we're really looking at what those anticipated return dates are. The other thing that we're looking at is when they're coming back, what does that reentry look like? Is it, because right now it's all over the map. We have some that are coming in every other day. We have some that they're bringing them in back-to-back days. We have some of them that are doing part-time, where they're bringing in a group in the morning, then a different group in the afternoon. And so depending on how they're deploying that schedule could impact the student's ability that even if we were open and offering in-person at North Tech or South Tech, the student's day might be occupied during the time that they would need to be coming to us because of the schedule that their sending school has adopted. So we really have to look at each one of those individual plans and see how does that sync up to North Tech or South Tech schedule.
So this is dependent in part, not fully, but in part, on when the other high schools return.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we could consider option post-November 9th, what that looks like for the districts that have open. If we have our teachers in the building, I think it would behoove us to investigate what alternatives might be, given the percentages of parents that are requesting their children to be back in school. January 9th, or 19th, excuse me, is the worst case scenario at this point, I'm hoping.
Yep, and we are, as partner districts are continuing to announce, since October 13th, we've had several partner districts release their plans. And so we're looking at each one of those to try and figure out how feasible is it. Because what we don't want to do is have it where we're offering in person, but the student's not able to access us because of what their partner district schedule is.
But at the same time, I would not like to have 20 partner districts starting in early December, and us not starting until January.
Yeah, understand.
And so what I would ask, as the board's input, is that we have we have right now a January 19th date, but I think that should be somewhat fluid, dependent upon what other high schools, again, knowing that you have to have a certain lead time to get, to get teachers in and all of that. But I think we set up January 19th as the date now, but we continue to review it at every meeting to see if we need to move that earlier.
Yep, and that's why we had the phase dates on the next steps piece. And the conversation we've had with our teachers, because a lot of them asked, why are we coming back on October 28th if students aren't going to be here until January 19th? And the conversation I've been having is, right now, we don't have students scheduled to return until January 19th. But if things outside of our buildings change, and we see a lot of our partner districts begin to adjust their schedules and adjust their plans, then we would need to adjust our plans accordingly based off what we're seeing in the partner district.
See, I don't see us, if that's exactly right, because I don't see us as having full control.
Right.
Of when. So I would recommend, and I would hope the rest of the board would agree with me, that we bring this up at each board meeting to see if we need to push that date for Voc Tech earlier than January 19th.
If we did want to do that, how long would it take for that mobilization to be possible? Once we say go,
Yep.
how many weeks do you need?
So we would really, the hard part will be student scheduling, especially if we change anything from what the current Family Choice Survey has been. So let's say that we're going to come in phase 2 as opposed to phase 1, or the plan is that we're eventually going to move to phase 3 come January, where students are back 5 days a week. We'd want to give families that new information so that they're making the best decision based off that info. It takes us about a week and a half to survey families. And then from there, counseling would have to be basically updating the schedules for every single student, and we're going to have to build some sections that might not currently exist to support those students. So roughly 3 weeks, probably 2 to 3 weeks. It just depends on how quickly we can get families to respond to the survey.
When is our next board meeting?
November 10th. Yeah.
10th. So we would be looking at early December.
Right.
If we decide the next board meeting, and really,
is.
unless we make that decision by the end of November,
Right.
make a difference.
Right, exactly. And I think that, what Mr. Andrews had said too, is that a lot of districts, since the time our board voted on it, they have moved ahead and they've accelerated it. We've seen more within the south, like the central and south, more so going in that direction than our north schools. So we want to make sure that we're looking at, if we did options, what does it look like if Hazelwood and Fort Flor and Rittner, which are our 3 largest districts in North Tech, would we be able to provide transportation through hubs so that students could go there and to be able to do that? So we'll have to arrange for that piece of it too, because what we don't want is to say South Tech opens up and then North Tech doesn't, but we're also at the mercy of some of the districts that are reopening too.
Yeah, and at this point, the only 2 districts that feed into North Tech that have returned to in-person for high school, Pattonville's coming back this week, and then Jennings has been in session since August, and that's it right now for the North region.
And Pattonville moved very fast, because last week when we were out and looking at the schools, that's when they announced. So they're moving pretty quickly when they do it.
I do not want to get in a position where we're opening at South Tech.
No, I don't recommend that either. But we also have 12 districts open and 10 not.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we start to balance those pieces out too?
So Amy, we already have that as an agenda item. I assume we're going to continue to get reopening updates at each
every board meeting.
Do we need to call anything out specific to tech to update with options for an earlier return?
Yes.
So I made a note, but it's already on the agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, our next update is on zero-based budgeting and budget process. Dr. Hogg is going to update the board. It's hard to believe that we are in October and that we are going to be starting to look at our budgeting process. He'll talk about what the process we'll be looking at with zero-based budgeting, and that this is one of our goals as me as the superintendent working with our cabinet to make sure that we're providing a real thoughtful process for the budget, and then that the board will be able to have a clear budget or preliminary budget by February. That's what we instituted last year, and it really allowed for us to accelerate the hiring for the spring of the year. So we want to be able to do that same process again. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Hogg.
Thank you. Good evening, President Cuneo, Vice President Brown, Board of Directors, Dr. Keenan. My name is Jeff Hogg. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a special school district, and I'm going to talk this evening about zero-based budgeting and the budget process. Go ahead and next slide, please. One of the major responsibilities of the Board of Education is to approve the budget annually, so it's only fitting that we provide an update on that process for you. Next slide, please. Zero-based budgeting is a methodology in which all expenditures are justified annually. Basically, in its simplest terms, zero-based budgeting, you start with zero, you start with that amount in your budget, and you build your budget from there. What this does is it allows the organization to align to the spending and strategic goals of the district. It allows the district to improve its resource planning, it increases employee engagement, and it increases organizational collaboration. When planning a zero-based budget, administrators really need to take into consideration the CSIP goals, current and future goals, areas and needs for students, and attaching budget to outcomes. Basically what that means is administrators and directors really need to look at how they can use the budget to support the educational, instructional, or department goals. Administrators will also need to determine priorities first and then look at past trends. Look at goals of what it takes to operate day to day and prioritize new goals to make departments and buildings more efficient. They'll also need to prioritize needs and wants and then look at that and see how those needs and wants fit within their department. So how do you determine priorities? How do building principals, administrators, and directors determine priorities? First, we need to take a look at what priorities and goals they used for this fiscal year and how they built the budget and determined what they needed this year. And then we'll take a look at the district goals, what the building wants to do, and what that focus is for next year. After that, you take into consideration if it's a director with a partner district and how we can use that budget and what our staff's doing there to support those goals. If it's an SSD school, we review building plans, we review our strategies, and review the outcomes we want and what that budget can support. And if it's an SSD department, we look at the projects or initiatives that we either have started or we want to complete in the future. So with zero-based budgeting, and this is probably one of the nicest concepts about zero-based budgeting, is that administrators may eliminate activities that they're currently doing, resources that they're currently buying to help fund new initiatives that they've deemed better able to meet the goals and meet the needs of what we're trying to do. This is also a good time when we're talking about partner districts to review integrated tier models of support or to look at the gap analysis that supports those tiered models of support and then look at professional learning plans. And basically what that tiered model is, they're instructional plans created in collaboration with our district and a partner district in which we use resources and assessments of both the partner district and our district to really help our students. And then that gap analysis takes a look at the current state and then pretty much the desired state of where those tiers need to be. And then that way we can see what we're missing and what training and what professional development we may need to better utilize those tiers. And so this is probably the biggest concept of zero-based budgeting. As budgets are planned for, it's important for administrators, directors to really identify what goes into their budget. And it falls under these three categories: needs, wants, and enhancements. A need is basically anything that it provides the most fundamental part of your curriculum. It allows you to serve and execute your curriculum, but a very fundamental need. A want is what you've done over time that really makes it a robust curriculum, and then an enhancement is what you need or what you think you can do to make it better over time. Let me give you an example. So if I am in a classroom and I decide that I need a workbook and manipulatives to provide this basic curriculum, we'll get the workbook and we'll get the manipulatives. If over time I have bought an online resource that really makes it a robust curriculum, that's my want, and that's something that we're probably going to continue because it keeps the current levels where they're at. If over time I decide that I think bringing in a speaker next year, 3 times a year, will really enhance what I'm doing, I'd like to look and see if we can do that. However, I know my needs to provide the basic curriculum. That's workbooks and manipulatives. We've provided this online resource that we're going to continue to do, so it's a robust curriculum. But I want that person to come in and speak 3 times next year. If we can get them, great, that's going to enhance the curriculum. If it doesn't fit in the budget, we know we can still provide a really good curriculum without that. So it's going to be needs, wants, and enhancements for our administrators and directors. So let me talk a little about the budget process. This is information provided to buildings, departments, and partner districts. So earlier this month, we provided training to administrators and directors, and during that training, we discussed a very high overview of funds. So our general revenue, our operating fund, our special revenue fund, and our capital project funds. And we discussed how that fit into the budget. We also talked about sources of revenue for our district, in which we receive 70% of our revenue from local funds, 21% from the state, and 9% from federal. So we talked about how funding, sources of revenue fit into deciding what money is allocated where. So as we open the budget process, administrators and directors will be provided a lot of data. They will be given 2 years of expenditure, historical expenditures, plus current year to date. They will also be given a baseline for staffing. They'll also be asked what capital improvements they need, and they'll submit those to facilities. That list will be prioritized by facilities and myself to see what we can and can't do over the 5-year plan for our buildings. So like I said, we'll provide historical data. Admin and directors have access to a greater breakdown, which is really what we want, and they can do this through reports that we have built through our system, and this is just the process they have to follow for that. So then as you'll see on this slide here, this is our budget trend data that they'll receive. And so one example is the expenditure data, and this will be historical. You can see FY18, FY19, FY20, and they'll see what they've spent this year already. One area that I really like is if you see this middle line with the 6,400 numbers, that's by object code, and you'll see that relates to such descriptors as textbooks, general supplies, instructional materials. What we're going to do is we are going to dive deeper into those codes and see really what textbooks they're looking at, what instructional materials they're ordering, what resources they need. And one way we're going to do that is through budget worksheets. These worksheets are the same as they've looked at and used in the past. We want to keep that continuity, but there'll be one addition. We're going to add a column that has the needs, the wants, and the enhancements. So they really have to look at it at that basic level, at the next level, and then what they can do to make it better. And so here's an example of one of those worksheets. The column with the needs, the wants, and the enhancements is being added. This sheet will be sent out to our directors and to our administrators when it goes live on November 6th. And then we get into personnel requests, and as I said, there will be a baseline for staff, and that will be determined, and that'll be sent out to the building. One thing that we are going to do at the cabinet and leadership level, we're going to look at the staffing ratios as we're providing this data to our directors and our administrators. And if we see something out of line with the ratio, we're going to go ahead and make a recommendation to add a position. We're not going to put that on them to identify it, to notify it. If we see something that we can make a change and make it more efficient, we're going to do that for them. But we want to be proactive. In the case, though, that we don't see something that they do or they have something from a ground level where they really want to ask for more staff, we'll allow them to ask. They'll just have to justify it on a caseload and student need and CSIP related. Again, this is providing what we need for our students to be successful. And so we're going to put that mechanism in place for them. Other payroll costs and personnel costs that need to be budgeted for by buildings and departments: overtime, substitutes, stipends, extra duty pay, homebound teachers, SNAP, an extended school year. There's a worksheet for that. There's historical evidence, historical data for that. So we'll give that to the buildings as well. And then the budget calendar basically has three phases. The first is planning, the second is review, and the third is either creation or building the budget. And so we'll get into that timeline here. So October and November, the superintendent and the budget committee will establish, and then the board will approve the fiscal goals and objectives for the upcoming year. So the budget committee, which includes Director Goodman and Director Pockroff, will meet in the very near future, and we'll bring those recommendations to the board. The other thing we are looking at this year is as we move forward with our strategic planning committee, if there are any recommendations that move forward that have financial impact, we'll take that and put that as a recommendation into the budget as well. Then we move into November and December. During November and December, the buildings, departments, and partner districts will identify their needs, their wants, and enhancements, and enter that into the initial budget requesting system. And then as we move into January, Dr. Keene and myself, the cabinet, and a couple of members of the accounting team will meet with admin and directors from special school district to review budget requests for special school district schools and departments. For our partner districts, Dr. Keene and myself, cabinet, and some members of the DLT, district leadership team, will have those same meetings, but we'll be joined by the superintendent and members of their team from the partner district. Dr. Keenan implemented this last year, and it went over really, really well, so that's something we're going to continue. So then, an additional resource that we ask from admin and directors to bring to this review meeting is a PowerPoint. There's an example in front of you. It says Rittner Budget Meeting on there. In there, you will find just a ton of data that we use that really shows that the schools, the directors, and the administrators know what they're requesting with their budget, why they're requesting it, why they're looking at staffing. And basically, it shows the goals, it shows historical student enrollment, it shows transfer rates, it shows change of placements, special education minutes, what that looks like over 3 years. It looks like MAP, formative assessment, discipline data, and disproportionality data. So we really ask a lot from our directors and administrators to justify the budget requests. And then this brings us to the February to June, which is really the building or the creation of the budget at that point. As Dr. Keenan mentioned, we'll have a budget workshop in February for the Board of Education. We'll have a budget workshop in March for the Governing Council. And by that time, we'll have a very good idea of what the budget's going to look like. There may be a little bit of salary change with negotiation. There may be some revenue change from the state as the spring takes shape. But other than that, we should have a pretty good idea when we come to that workshop in February and March. And then, of course, by June, we need to, according to state statute, approve a preliminary budget by June 30th. So we'll bring that to the board in May, Governing Council in June, as historically has been done. That concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Let me ask one for me and one for Ms. Goodman. Jan, if you're there, you may want to ask me. If I don't say it right, tell me. Her question was, the strategic plan is intended to identify priority areas which may have budget implications. Would it be appropriate to state that the plan will be an input for the strategic plan, for the FY21, F22 budgetary planning?
Yes, that's exactly what it'll be for, and we'll address that for the FY21, FY22 budget.
Okay, Jan, I'm guessing you're on the phone and you're muted at this point. If that's not correct, come on in. Oh, thumbs, I got a thumb up. Okay, I got a question here on sources of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Under federal funds, 9%. I was just curious, does that also include all of the title funds? And does that also include the Medicaid billing? Wow, that's it?
That's it.
Yep. Yeah, I was surprised too. I thought it'd be higher than the 9%.
One
as we
time we
looked.
were told,
Yeah.
full funding was 25%. We never got that, ever. That's never in 1,000 years. But I thought it was around 15%. 9% is brutal.
Yeah, all the historical data we've looked at and the records I can find say the 9%.
Wow. Okay. That just seems brutal to me. I'm not arguing at all.
Any other questions? Okay. Continue to update. We had the board committee meeting, that'll be in November with Tachoff and with Goodman, and we'll update you guys according to that. All right, we have one more presentation with Chief Schechter. She's going to be presenting about staff retention data. This is something that we presented to the board last year, and we want to update you on progress with some of the information that we've been working on in terms of how staff are, what's the numbers of the staff that are staying, and what is our retention, and looking at how we are continuing to address staffing.
Good evening, President Cuneo, Vice President Brown, SSD Board of Directors. I'm Amy Schechter, the Chief Human Resources Officer, and as Dr. Keenan explained, I'm going to be sharing with you tonight our staff retention data for the 2019-2020 school year. So on the first slide, I just wanted to share some basic information about calculating retention and turnover. And really, when you look at retention, we look at that as the number of staff that chose to stay. So they were with us at the beginning of last school year, and they stayed with us at the end of that school year, coming into this school year. And then our turnover represents the number of separations that we had from the district. And separations really fall into two categories: your voluntary and your involuntary turnover. Obviously, voluntary is primarily made up of employees who choose to leave the district on their own. But another factor in turnover is retirement, and that is a nationwide, in business and corporate, retirements are calculated into turnover. I know it was a question that we had last year when I presented this type of information, but those are the national the trends in doing that. But many times what they do is they report their turnover, then as well as their retirement percentages. So that's what I prepared this evening to break that down a little bit more specifically. And then, of course, our involuntary turnovers are those, staff that are terminated or non-renewed by action of the district. So, and we move into the next slide. It's broken the retention down into each area, being administrator, teacher, and paraprofessional retention data. And so this is a summary of the retention rates and turnover rates beginning with the 15-16 school year until the 19-20 school year. And looking at 19-20, as some of you have pointed out, that those don't equal 100% of the staff that we have. And the main reason it's so evident here in our administrator numbers is we started last school year with administrator vacancies that stayed vacant the entire school year. And were covered by substitute administrators. So that has an impact on our rates. So you can see that our turnover rates and retention rates we were in better shape moving into this past school year, but we did see a decrease again. It's very difficult at this point to really predict what impact the pandemic has had on our retention rates. I know that we've had some discussion about tracking and doing a monthly comparative over numbers of resignations and retirements that have been received, so we can try to make some sense out of this. So that's data that we will continue to compile. It's just a little too early to share that, but when I do an overall HR update in February, that is information that I will have to that point. Looking at our next slide is our teacher retention and turnover. Again, we saw a dip in retention and an increase in turnover. When we look at that, we also have, like I said, We had a lot of vacancies as we started last school year. Some of those were vacant the entire school year. We're in a better shape starting the 2021 school year with, we started with no teacher vacancies. So I'm interested to see what impact that may have on our retention rates. When we look at the next slide, I've shared that data with you at the district level. So each of our partner districts are represented, as well as early childhood and our SSD schools. I really caution you, though, not to compare districts, because it's really like comparing apples to oranges, because when we start talking about percentages, obviously when you look at a district like Bayless that looks like they had an 11% turnover, you would think that is kind of large compared to some others, but when you look at the total number of teaching positions in Bayless at 27, you can imagine the loss of one or two significantly impacts their percentages, whereas a larger district like Parkway that has the 278 teachers, you know, their turnover rate is lower, but they had a lot more people leave. So it just kind of gives an idea where to look at some trends with each of the districts. Sure.
If retention and turn isn't necessarily a good metric for understanding, you know, how happy our staff are placed in the individual partner districts, is there a better way, or do we get more qualitative feedback on ascertaining which were good partners?
Yeah. Yes, I think so, and I think a lot of it, even if it comes down, I even still think at the district level, it's too broad. I think oftentimes we have to look at individual building levels and at individual administrative levels, because one of the primary reasons that's listed in all the national surveys and research that I read is that typically the number one or two reason, depending on the study that you read, that teachers leave the position is lack of administrative support. And so I think that that is a big factor. And we can drill this down to the building level. It's a lot to have on a slide, but it is something that we have in human resources and that we're working on, trying to get some of that data together to see, do we have pockets in places that we need to pay more attention to?
No, that's wonderful to know how you guys do the data.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. So our para retention rate, we actually, just the next slide, I'm sorry, Mark. Our para retention rates, we actually had our best year yet. And looking at our data with the number of paraprofessionals that remained with the district, our turnover was much lower. So again, it's another area to look at to say, well, does the pandemic really have an impact? Because we had lower retention in the other areas, but our para is, we did increase. We did make paraprofessional retention a much higher priority. Last year, Dr. Keenan and I did some listening tours, and we really put together some committees to do some work as far as addressing that. So I think that's a positive sign. We just need to continue that work and keep that committee going. And again, I shared the district level paraprofessional data. Then the next slide is where we look at our retirement data. And so when we look at our total number of positions that we had in each of those categories and the number of retirements that we have, you can see the percentage of staff that left due to retirement. And so, you know, like, we could take that and remove that from our turnover rate, because we said, well, they stayed with us until they retired. So is that really turnover? It is, by definition, and by practice, it's turnover. However, I think that to have numbers this high to look at, you know, we are focusing on figuring out more about why do teachers choose, or administrators or paras choose to stay until they can retire. And that's really kind of on our last, my last slide here, just talking about getting more of that information and more of that consideration that we can start to collect and share. Like I said, with our national data, currently the trend is the number one reason that teachers are leaving the field is dissatisfaction with accountability pressures, primarily with testing. The second being the lack of administrative support. And then the third being the dissatisfaction with the profession, the career choice. And then number 4 being the dissatisfaction with working conditions in their individual assignments. And so knowing that and taking a look at that to see what we can do to find out and to fine-tune our survey that we would do with staff to determine why are you staying. And again, I think that if we put a lot of emphasis on finding out why staff left, what are we really going to use that data for? They chose to leave, they're on their way out when we ask them, why are you leaving? I think we need to have a more proactive response in asking staff, why are you staying? And doing more with that data in order to have more proactive measures that we can put in place. If we know what it is that keeps staff in the positions that they're in, what can we do to make sure that all staff feel that way? Again, looking at exit survey data on why staff chose to leave is important because it helps us pick up patterns and determine those types of things to try to correct issues. But oftentimes if we just focus on correcting problems, we lose sight of continuing to perpetuate the good things that we have that staff like. Our impacts of turnover, obviously there's a big financial impact of turnover regardless of the company, of its education or of corporate America. We have to replace staff. We have to train the staff that replace them. We have to do those types of things. But also it's a lot of transitions for students, especially students. A lot of times in our programming, they have the same staff work with them for multiple years, unlike in our general education settings. And for many of them, especially with our related service personnel, they may work with them their entire time at a particular grade level. And so reducing those transitions for students is helpful in student performance. And then also, the nation is facing a major teacher shortage. Data is showing that fewer and fewer teachers are entering the profession. I shared some information about that when I talked about my CSIP presentation a few meetings ago. And then again, with the increase in teacher turnover, the national average of teacher turnover is 8%. 5% of them leaving the profession for good, 3% leaving where they were and doing something different for another district. We really want to, like I said, focus on identifying our causes and really having that two-pronged approach in in not only why did you choose to leave, but why did you choose to stay? And so working with the communications department and really getting those voice of customer surveys that we could get developed and implemented to pull that data. And looking at the 1920 data, we had an electronic system that staff could utilize up until the transition to the new SSD life that allowed them to submit their resignation or retirement to the district electronically. And in that, we asked for reason for their leaving the district. And so looking at those top reasons, of course, the number one reason that staff gave was they chose not to give a reason. So that is one change I'd like to make, is not allow an option for I don't want to give a reason. The number two reason was retirement. So that is that's good. The third was accepting or seeking other employment. And then the fourth highest was relocation. Not clear from that data if that was relocation within the St. Louis area, because the county is so large, did that relocation mean that they had a really long commute now, or if they left the area? And then just working on creating those action steps. And like I said, the exit survey and those components are all part of the CSIP goal work in Goal 2, Workforce Focus. And so we'll continue to work with that. So that was my presentation. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I have a couple different ones. One of them is, how many years does an employee work for SSD before they are up for retirement?
It really depends on if they worked for SSD before or not. It depends on their age and the number of years. So with the public teachers, actually all employees at special school district are enrolled in the public school retirement system. And so our certified staff are in one group, the PSRS group, and then our support staff are in the peers group. And so there's different calculations to determine when you're eligible to retire and receive those retirement benefits. After 5 years, they are vested in the retirement system. So currently, they make a annual contribution or through each paycheck, and the district matches that. And so being vested in the retirement system, if they leave prior to that, the district's contribution does not stay with them. It's returned to the district. But it's going to be really dependent on a lot of factors. Yeah. It's not a standard. You're with us 20 years and you get the pension. Because our obligation is to enroll employees in the state mandated system.
Another question I had, or actually suggestion, I'm sure you probably thought about this, but sending out a survey with the staff that continue on the next year, after they sign their contract, also do a short survey of why did you choose to,
That's a good idea to link it. Since we do the electronic contract signatures now, it could link to that. I like that. Thank you.
Instead of red flag, they green flag too. And then I think that was,
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along. Would someone like to move, I believe, you can see that far. I believe it's agenda. Would someone like to move to approve the agenda?
The consensual
items for tonight.
So,
second.
All in favor?
aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Let's see, I think it's essential.
Action item.
Seven point oh, that is. This will be COVID.
Temporary COVID-19
Good explanation of this. I have a motion to accept.
So,
Okay, please, discussion.
So presenting this evening, a temporary policy for the board to review, and recommendation is to adopt. That would allow for the policy to be in effect until June 30th of 2021, making that a temporary policy. And that would be to allow for staff who are quarantined by special school district, a partner district, or the local health department, that those staff would be eligible to work from home, work remotely, or to be on quarantine leave if they are not able to work remotely due to their position. Also, it has a provision for COVID-19 illness leave for staff to utilize 10 paid days of sick leave in the event that they've been diagnosed with COVID-19 by a licensed medical professional. This would mirror the provision provided in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act amendments to the Family and Medical Leave Act, because those amendments in FFCRA expire at the end of this calendar year on December 31st.
So it's my understanding we are making sure that those safeguards are kept into place
Yes.
until the end of June next year.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And this is additional safeguards that goes beyond the CARES Act.
Yes, the CARES Act doesn't provide for that. The CARES, but it's an amendment to FMLA. Yes.
So this will provide additional safety.
Yes.
For our teachers
Yes.
and parents.
Yes. It'll be, the board will be providing a leave that that will be taken away when the amendments expire. So it's going above and beyond what the federal government's requirements are.
To clarify, Checker, that's an additional 10 days beyond what the law allows.
Yes. Yes. Are there any questions?
So it provides an additional safeguard for our teachers.
For all staff,
No,
for all staff.
not just teachers, for all staff.
This is,
All staff, yes.
this is going along with the commitment to continue to pay staff, even when times when they're not able to work because of the.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Everyone in agreement with this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I guess, let's just take a vote. Let's get it to a roll call. I want a roll call. Everyone should be supportive of this.
Dr. Asner?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Petrop?
Yes.
Vice President Brown?
Yes.
President Cuneo?
Yes. So we have a unanimous vote on a program that could very well provide additional safeguards for our teachers and all our staff. Okay. Good. Okay. The following items were approved in tonight's executive meeting: employment, resignations, retirement, salary adjustments, extra duty pay, termination of employment, and 3 settlements. Would someone like to make a motion for a closed meeting? That's what I can't find anymore. On
November 10th.
November 10th and December 8th, is that?
Yes.
2020, at 5:30 p.m.
Second.
I need a roll call on this, please.
Director Asner?
Yes.
Director Faulkner?
Yes.
Director Goodman?
Yes.
Director Petrop?
Yes.
Vice President Brown?
Yes.
President Cuneo?
Yes. All right, our next agenda item, I believe, approval of minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve or pass minutes? Minutes of September 22nd executive, the tax rate, and business meetings of October 13th, and the October 13th, 2020 special work study and executive minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstained. Okay. Motion carries. Board member resignation. Thank you to Latricia Morgan for her work with this board and for SSD. At a later date, we will thank her at a meeting. But what this does mean is that we have a board vacancy. And the filing will open for the board. This is for Sub-District 4. We first need a motion to approve Latrice's resignation. So would someone like to make that motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll go aye regretfully. Remember, I can see you shaking your hand. And at a later date, we will. In the meantime, there will be a filing for Sub-District 4 to replace her vacancy. Filing will open at October 29th at 8:30 a.m. Filing will close on November 20th at 3 p.m. Further information could be obtained by going on SSD's website, and all the posting information will be there at that time. And that should be up tomorrow?
Yes.
Thank you. All righty. And the next thing on there would be the calendar, would be
Board communication.
board communications.
I think we have.
Calendar events, we can look at that on the next, on your board docs. Would someone like to make a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, tonight.
3 minutes, Dr.